Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the realignment calf scramble is on. Is today the day the Big 12 finally grabs the remaining three of the four corners by the tail? Also previewing Texas Tech Media Day and recapping those missing in action from the spring up ahead on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, and Chris back at it once again in what could be an action-packed day. This will be an action-packed episode as we get to Texas Tech football coming up. Got a local Red Raider Media Day going down in the LBK. We'll look ahead to that and also some things that we may hear at that Media Day regarding the laundry list of Red Raiders that were not available back during the spring. We may have to refresh your memory a little bit, but there were some big hitters on that list, and that's one of maybe the undertold kind of storylines heading into fall camp so far, guys that are just now going to be strapping it up for the first time maybe this year because they didn't a few weeks, couple months ago. So we'll get to that before we're out of here. Red Raider football thoughts and perspective up ahead. But first, the action has to begin out west once again, Chris, because we're showing back up here on this day. And the term that is floating around is 24-hour window, which means immediate action is possible. If you've been paying any attention, you've probably been hearing 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. Things could move very quickly after an Arizona meeting coming up later on this evening. And don't forget, Arizona State sharing a board there. So one meeting could knock out a couple of big decisions. And then possibly a Big 12 gathering, I suppose, of some kind as well is what possibly could be coming together. And, Chris, it's exciting if you're a Big 12 fan, probably devastating if you're a Pac-12 fan or at least a sentimental one. But this is the lay of the land today. What else are you hearing about what might come to pass in the very, very near future?
Well, yesterday was a very newsy day in realignment with lots of, I don't know if they were bombs, but bombshells. And there was some meaty things reported yesterday. Florida State, the folks that are in charge of that university are popping off. Talking about how disgruntled they are, and hey, man, if something doesn't change, we're going to likely get out. I don't know what leverage they ultimately have. I think them trying to challenge their grant of rights agreement, which is up, I think lasts until 2036. As the young people would say, that's a bit sus on trying to break that deal. So I don't know what leverage they have. And then you've got the Big Ten kind of starting to, sneak around the chicken coop a little bit, which we've known they were a player here.
Terrific analogy.
Yes, I mean,
the money.
Yes, I think though that ultimately, and then you've got the Arizona Board of Regents meeting, which is going to be late this afternoon, this evening. That is, and on the agenda, this will take place behind closed doors, I think, in an executive session. But basically, they want some legal advice relating to athletics and things like that. I think we're not stupid here. We can suggest that this absolutely has to do with the future conference affiliation with University of Arizona and Arizona State. And I think they could make a decision. This group could make a decision ultimately for both institutions. This is seemingly moving very quickly. I think that the Pac-12 so here's some of the other things that I've heard. The Pac-12 commissioner, George Kliavkoff, tried to get a meeting together with certain folks yesterday. I think was unable to do so. I think
Hey, by the way, the thing I saw was that some of those same folks called the Big Ten the same day that George was asking them to call him. What a day.
Follow the money. In every case here, show me, follow me, whatever. I mean, like the Jerry Maguire reference, show me the money, Jerry. That is all that this is. and now, and what I find funny is that there's a lot of, journalists that are kind of pinning these articles nationally, about schools. How dare schools try to look out for their best interest and this and that. It's just, I don't know. Some of this is just, it's just kind of comical.
Self-aggrandizing, self-righteous hypocrisy.
Yes.
Shove it.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, this is maybe close to being finished, but nobody that's making moves here for the most part started this. But the Arizona schools are the one to watch. I think that the meeting tonight, this afternoon, is certainly what to pay attention to. Are we going to get any immediate answer? Possibly. I think there's even been suggestions that, Calvin, what you were hinting at a while ago, that the Big 12 folks could in fact get together and decide. And if you hear this and it's officially reported, it's curtains. But if you see any report of Big 12 getting together to go ahead and vote, should Arizona and Arizona State or whoever else apply for membership, unanimous vote, we vote. If you hear anything like that, it's game over, because this is exactly the process that happened with Colorado. And I say game over for the Pac-12. But, look at, if you start processing what a Big 12 would look like with these additional three corner schools, and we've talked about it, we've speculated it. Look, it looks likely at this point. It's not done, but it sure all points to that. But you think about it. You have a heavy, with that 16-team league, and I know you're not going to make the money that the SEC or the Big Ten do. However, when you start checking the geography boxes here, and you start looking at, you have heavy presence, and it's not about markets because of the streaming component. However, there's still some level of it that does come into play. But you will have a heavy presence, if it falls into place like we think, in the city of Houston, in Dallas-Fort Worth, in Denver, in Phoenix, in Salt Lake City, in Cincinnati, in Orlando. I mean, you are hitting some big markets, and you're Kansas City. I forgot to mention that. I mean, still. So these are major markets in some cases. There's a lot of population here. You really are set up to, I think, to be in good shape for the long term if it does come to pass and these three other schools are added. And what you're going to read and what you're going to hear is they all kind of want to do this together. I don't think that you'll necessarily hear, hey, we've accepted this one. I think that the folks on the Big 12 side, and I think that they want some continuity with these other three schools. They want to kind of be in lockstep here. So I don't know how long this is going to take to play out, but I think that whenever you do get this announcement, it's like, okay, here we all are.
Fascinating. And I've got to just remind myself that as a Texas Tech fan, I'm getting what was the initial dream best case scenario out of a worst case scenario. The conference does not improve from what it once was, but Chris, I think there's some conversation always to be had, or there was always to be had, about the Big 12 having the meatiest middle of any Power 5 league, really, in kind of any of its incarnations. There's always been a depth to it, I think. A lot of programs that, and maybe athletics departments at large or as a whole, that are like, top 25, top 40-ish kind of range in the nation. And it maybe is not blue-bloodish enough to not get bagged on by national media and things like that, but it's not bad enough to be picked apart like the Pac-12. There's a lot of care factors still in this league. And as a Tech fan, I'm just sitting here kind of amazed and wowed that what was the initial hope out of this, again, kind of rebuild scenario is probably going to come to pass. And it also strikes me which is a stronger Big 12 with Power 5 additions, that being the four corners. It just strikes me as hilarious also that, as an example, and I'm sure this is happening elsewhere as well, on RedRaidersports.com, where you cover recruiting so well for many years, there's a message board where some wild conversation takes place. And there's like an over 800-page thread about Big 12 expansion and or general realignment that started when some of these initial bombs dropped, right? And there's a guy probably on the first page of that sumbug that was eating like a brick of stale ramen that was just typing with one hand like, I don't know, I bet Big Ten just gets the Ducks, the Huskies, Cal, Stanford. Big 12 just needs the four corners, call it a day. And after all of the weeping and gnashing of teeth, Chris, Arizona State, Utah, others, no, we don't want to do this. Big Ten, oh, we don't want to bring the death knell to the Pac-12. After all of the bull, where are we going to wind up in what seemed like the most logical scenario to begin with? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Does that make sense? I feel like this has always been the most logical outcome, but good grief, the labor pains you had to go through to get here have just been kind of amazing to look back on now.
And yet there's so many things that could have happened to alter this outcome along the way.
True.
I mean, I wasn't aware until I read this a day or two ago that we're well aware that when Texas and Oklahoma, departed, that Bob Bowlesby reached out to Kliavkoff and said, hey, we've got eight left right now. What do you think about a merger? He was like, man, I'm good. Appreciate it. Good luck to you. I hope all is well.
Right.
And what I did not know is that until just recently, it was widely reported that George Kliavkoff made the same call to Brett Yormark last summer. Whenever USC and UCLA left, he's like, hey, man, merger, deal is still on the table. And I think the Big 12 was like, no, man, we're good. Hope all is well.
Yeah, Brett's like, Bob left a note somewhere about a guy named Kliavkoff. Let me find that.
But, I mean, you think about the additions to, how many different times and realistic times was Texas Tech mentioned as a member of the Pac-16? And to many folks at the time were like, do it. I love it. Bring it on. We'll deal with the late kick times, whether you were talking about being included with Texas and Oklahoma State, which was the first time.
Yeah.
Or whether you're talking about, hey man, us, Oklahoma State, maybe Kansas.
Chris, I think that first time was a different scenario, right? Over a decade ago. But this most recent instance that you were just alluding to there is a landmine sidestepped. And I think the only people that didn't, or that really wanted Tech to be heading west at that time were people that just, I guess, thought USC and UCLA left because they were bored and they just wanted to go play with new friends. And maybe they weren't all that aware of the financial despair that was the reality on the West Coast. I don't know. If I look back on that move, I'm thankful that didn't come to pass. And I wasn't one of those that wanted it then. Where were you at that time? And do you kind of think that could have gone really poorly if it came to pass? First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And in this day and age, every new hire can feel like a huge gamble. And when we're talking about your business or livelihood, that's not ideal. But LinkedIn Jobs is here to help by helping you find the best qualified candidates available fast and for free, all on one easy to use and secure platform. Simple but specific targeting tools allow you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to consider. They go beyond just resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates faster than anyone else. So go to linkedinjobs.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedinjobs.com/lockedoncollege today to identify the most qualified candidates and connect with them fast and for free. Just like a bad hire could sink your ship, the right hire could take your business to new heights this year. And it's no coincidence that small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's so easy. Even a podcast host could do it. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. Where were you at that time? And do you kind of think that could have gone really poorly if it came to pass?
Yeah, I think there were various times that I think you knew maybe what you wanted, but ultimately you were just hoping that your school, the one that we all follow and graduated from or love so much, you're hoping for survival.
Yeah.
Like what I didn't want is to be in like the Mountain West. I didn't want to be in a league with New Mexico or University of or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking like that's what makes this stuff so much fun. You get some juice when it comes to the fall and in the spring with teams that come in here and venues that you get to play in, and your league is relevant. So ultimately that was, and I was never really a fan of going to the West just because nobody wants to sign up for watching their team at 9:00 at night on the reg.
Yeah.
And things like that. But if that's what it was going to take to survive and be part of the have, then absolutely. Because this stuff spills into facilities and coaching salaries and assistant coaches' salaries.
Oh, yeah.
And on and on and on. And it at some level, it creates a level of whether you are competitive or not. And I get it. And we kind of fall into this at some level too. Because, this has been a bit of a competition. You feel like if you're Texas Tech fan and you follow Realignment, you feel like you've lost many battles over the years.
Yes.
Missouri, Nebraska, A&M, Colorado, now Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, we just kind of watched it splinter. You've been on the rumor to, list for, okay, don't know if they're going to make it, you can continue to kind of hold on to that life raft. And so you get there's a level of competitiveness here. You feel like you're kind of in the mix now, and we're like, okay, we're winning some of this Realignment stuff. But nobody rooted for this, but it is things that college fans are paying attention to and are excited about. But what I think, what a lot of the folks that are writing about this are basically saying, what schools have done or leagues have done is train people to be, revenue rooters. It's like you're out there rooting and care so much about revenue, you're not going to see any of that money. And I certainly understand that component, because the one article that I read was, man, what's wrong with regional rivalries? What's wrong with basically, playing schools that are close to each other? Because I mean, if you read some of this Big Ten stuff with these potential Pac-12 additions, it'll blow your mind, man, on some of the travel they're talking about. And I don't know where the money comes from. And there's some of these schools that are like, what are we doing? Why are we signing up for this? Because you're telling me my tennis team's going to have to travel how far on a Wednesday? And like we're going to have to play a football game starting at 9:00 at night if we're Rutgers every other year. Like I don't no comprende here. Like I don't get it. Like what are we doing? And there's not extra money being reported. That's the thing. And so I think everybody's kind of scratching their head going, time out. So anyway, it's pretty fascinating.
Well, the next bullet points on this wild timeline, Arizona, once again, we're looking to the desert, and then possibly a Big 12 gathering as well to see if there's anything like a rubber stamp.
I'll tell you this, Cowan.
Yeah.
If we get, we may even be back. We'll see. I don't want to promise anything, but if it breaks sideways later today, you and I will reconvene and do something immediately.
Yeah. You mean like an episode or just have a beer or what?
Well, all the above. We can do an episode, have a beer at the same time. I don't mind.
It feels like a long exploration that would maybe end with the smoke. Definitely. I can understand that. Okay, so make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get this podcast so you don't miss it when it goes down. Okay, we're wrapping it up with Red Raider football coming up ahead. We're going to preview Texas Tech Media Day and get back to what was a long list of Red Raiders and some heavy hitters not taking part in the spring. So that'll be part of what we're interested in hearing about later on today from Joey McGuire and the gang. We'll get to that next on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech a part of your day wherever you may be. With Chris, I'm Casey coming to you from west of the 100th Meridian where it's really going down, and wrapping up today's conversation back in the LBK with a conversation preview. This is a conversation man's dream conversation, Chris. We're talking about talking, which is what they're doing later today. Texas Tech Media Day happening here locally. And, always curious to hear from any of these guys as they get closer and closer to the season. But something that you mentioned to me yesterday when we were talking about what was going to happen today was a part of the conversation that maybe hadn't been touched on all that much since spring camp. And maybe it's not all that big of a deal, but certainly noteworthy, the guys that were not involved in spring camp or were sidelined at that time. And that probably will be something of peak interest, I guess, for those asking questions of Coach McGuire and company later on today. But one of many things maybe to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, so I think this will be kind of a State of the Union, for Tech football today. And I think, that'll be part of what all the news that comes out later today is related to Texas Tech football. But like one of the main things I'd be willing to bet you'll hear some of the following. You're going to hear, look, hey, how much stronger our team is. I bet you could hear some numbers there on how many guys, because I've heard some of these numbers and they're staggering as far as how many guys can do this, how many guys can do that. Maybe how much faster your team is. But you're also going to hear how healthy your team is entering into camp. And just to refresh everybody's memory, because I had to go back and check my notes and make sure that I was remembering this correctly from back in the spring. The following either missed all of spring, part of spring, or the spring game for various injuries, ailments, rehab, whatever. And it was substantial. And so I think you'll get a lot of updates on these individuals. And let's hope that they're all good to go.
Yes.
I think that maybe not all good to go, but we'll get an update there on kind of where it's at. On offense, Coy Aiken, Xavier White, Brady Boyd, all three of those guys are receivers. Tight ends, Mason Tharp, Jaden York, okay? Bryson Donnell and Quan Willis, two running backs, and then Landon Peterson, offensive line. These are folks that missed either all or the bulk of the spring. And then we go over to defense. Now you're really getting into some starters and top rotational guys. Rashad Williams, we know his situation. Tyler Owens, safety. Jacob Rodriguez, Isaac Smith, both kind of linebacker, outside linebacker types. Joseph Adedere, Tony Bradford, Jalen Hutchings, and Duda Banks, all defensive linemen. Imagine trying to go at it if that was your injury list in one of these upcoming games. Would scare you a lot.
Buddy, I'd be worried.
Yes, and rightfully so. And so, look, Jalen and Tony are fine. This is precautionary, but I think Rashad Williams is fine. He's actually going to meet with the media today. Mason Tharp was a precautionary issue with just kind of some head stuff. I think he's got a special helmet now and all that stuff, and I think they were just trying to be smart with him. He's meeting with the media today as well. But, again, it's a long list. I'm kind of curious myself, kind of what updates we get on the health of some of these guys. And then one guy that I didn't even really mention, because it's a whole separate category, is Bryce Ramirez. Where does Bryce Ramirez stand with everything based on his injury that he suffered in Raleigh, North Carolina last year?
Yeah, that's a good question for a whole variety of other reasons. But I guess I just kind of lost track of how many of those cornerstone kind of
easy
guys.
to do.
Man, those cornerstone kind of guys weren't in the mix. And, there's a wide variety there, I guess, within that group also. When you talk about guys like Jalen Hutchings, provided that it's not, really a debilitating injury of some kind, but if it is a moderate to mild reason as to why he's missing camp, how much is that really going to drag him down? Probably not looking at him as in the same kind of light as somebody that's maybe a little greener behind the ears. But I hate to say that anybody can afford to, miss reps in an ultra competitive business, which is what they were in. But yeah, you think about some of the older guys versus some of the younger guys and probably impacting them a little differently as far as missing that time.
Yeah, I think, because I will tell you that, like Coy Aiken, for example, I think he was doing really well, almost to the point where I was getting ready to start talking about him as like, look out.
Yeah.
He's the young man that from Stephenville that, he caught a ton of passes his senior year.
He led the world, I think.
Yes. And he was the game, you could tell, had started to slow down a little bit for him. and he wasn't swimming mentally as much. And I think it was kind of started to figure it out, but then he gets dinged up. Like I didn't put his name on this list, but Loic Fouonji missed a ton of the spring. He just happened to play in the spring game and did really, really well. But it's just so that's because that's ultimately you want to figure out how good you're going to be this year. You're going to need to be a little lucky. And in the next 3 to 4 weeks, what you just want to hear is everybody's good, you know, because that's in football, as we know. I mean, it's rough. Guys get tired. You get worn down. Things happen, minor, major in some cases. And you just hope that, this is a year where you can stay mostly healthy. But this is why so many of these additions and so much of your recruiting and your transfer portaling and all that has come into play here because it's created depth. The best teams are the ones that in mid-October, when a few key, maybe even more than a few key guys are down and guys just fill in and you don't really miss a beat. That's always been the secret because there's not a team out there that just skates through and you're just, don't deal with any injuries. And obviously, the Red Raiders did last year with the quarterback situation a lot. But you just hope that you've got enough depth to handle a lot of this. But, yeah, a lot of these guys, I think they were really high on Bryson Donnell and Anquan Willis. Anquan Willis was a guy out of Wichita Falls Rider, I believe, that they'd even talked about when they signed him. It was like, we may look at him in another position. He could maybe do some things. But I think after they kind of saw him in a brief briefly, whatever, I think they're like, man, he may stay at running back a little bit. So it's just, but yeah, you don't get some of that time to watch these kids develop. So,
well, with that position specifically too, Chris, you're thinking about, hey, we got a help wanted sign behind Taj Brooks. So we're looking for somebody to fill some shoes here. And you hate for guys to miss those kinds of opportunities. And I was just thinking as you were kind of running that down and you did refer back to last year and the obvious, injury issues you had with the QB, but trying to think overall, was that a lucky injury year, an unlucky injury year? Because you had like some big hitters you had to get over, and then you had some of that preseason stuff with guys like Cole Spencer. But I also think as I look at some prior seasons, maybe you're a little more beleaguered in some years gone by. Maybe it's just the same as it always was. How do you look back at last year, big picture? Were you fairly lucky as a team, say for the quarterback?
I'm going to say unlucky. Yeah. I thought last year sucked. Think about it. You had multiple quarterbacks miss a bulk of their season. You had Tyree Wilson, your best player, miss a fourth of your season. Miles Price was not ever really right.
Yep.
Loic missed plenty of time. You mentioned the Cole Spencer thing. I guess it could have always been worse, but I would say, last year was like, you felt like you were being picked on a little bit, and there wasn't anything. And that was the thing. It was never devastating. It never just totally, crippled you as a program because you still were able to keep your head above water and be just fine and win. And I think it spoke to the depth that you had created because you did. You were able to sustain it. And again, wasn't pretty at times. It was a bit of a grind at times. And you went for it on fourth down a lot to try to overcome some of that, So maybe you don't have to do that as much this year if you could stay a little healthier.
It would, even if you had no other injuries, it'd be kind of hard back to look at a year where you had to use 3 damn quarterbacks and think, it wasn't too bad injury-wise. That's something else we'll be talking about soon on an upcoming episode as we look once again at that quarterback conversation, Chris, and why depth is so important at that position. We learned it as well as anyone a season ago, and curious maybe what that experience will be like this year. But we'll save that for another episode. Stick with us. Again, subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you make sure you miss no realignment conversations as the action continues to happen fast and furiously. More fur will be flying, I think, in the next 24 hours. So hopefully you'll join us back for any conversation soon to come here on Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, enjoyed it as always, man. Thanks for the time and the insights.
Keep hope alive and keep your head on a swivel in these next day or two. Yeah. With Texas Tech football, with Pac-12, with all kinds of stuff going on. Just pay attention.
And join us tomorrow. We'll have some things that stand out to us today from Texas Tech Media Day. We'll hear from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire on the program tomorrow as we wrap up the week with that and who knows what else. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you then on Locked On Texas Tech.